Rome, Italy's capital, one of the world's mightiest superpowers. Its architecture is an eclectic contrast of 400-year-old buildings standing next to 2,000-year-old ruins. It's the birthplace of modern Christianity, dating from the 3rd century. Its art museums are some of the finest in the world. Come with us as we journey into the ancient origins of Western civilization. Join us as we explore the treasures of Rome. Located in central Italy, the city of Rome is rich in history. It's the origin of much of what makes up Western society today. From Christianity and its values that still underpin modern society, to technology, including great feats of engineering. Even some of our modern laws can be traced back to Rome. And for the traveler, it's a fascinating journey back through time itself. Stroll through the ancient Colosseum, the 2,000-year-old setting for the movie Gladiator, and through the Roman Forum. We'll see the largest Christian cathedral in the world and the center of Catholicism. Hop aboard a train for a day excursion to world-famous water gardens, and discover one of the most popular walks across the city. Once a world power, Rome's ancient empire stretched across all sides of the Mediterranean into 3 continents, from Europe to Asia to North Africa and all the way to Britain. In fact, because it ruled all of its shores, ancient Roman Caesars once called the Mediterranean their own private pond. Although Rome is a major city, travelers find that many of its major attractions are within walking distance to each other. The words ancient Rome typically conjure up images of the Caesars, the Roman army, the glorious buildings. And around the ancient perimeter of the city, you'll still see the remains of the defensive walls here and there. But the most famous building that often comes to mind is the colossal Colosseum, built by the Emperor Vespasian in 69 AD and completed by Titus in 80 AD. If you saw the movie Gladiator, you'll know this edifice was at the center of the storyline. It is the largest ancient amphitheater ever built and could seat 85,000 people. Its design was an early prototype of modern sports arenas today. Spectators could purchase admission tokens and could find their seats in just 15 minutes. Entertainment here was a place of bloodshed as gladiators and wild animals fought to the death and Christians were executed, all for the amusement of citizens of an empire that would eventually decline. The wooden floor that once covered this basement area was covered in sand to soak up the blood from the day's carnage. Gladiators used ancient elevators to emerge from this underground labyrinth, and the floor's drains could be blocked to flood the arena to stage mock sea battles. Caesar himself would sit here, pointing his thumb up if a defeated gladiator was to be spared, or pointing his thumb down. Hail Caesar! A cleric once said, "While the Colosseum stands, Rome shall stand. And when the Colosseum falls, Rome shall fall. And when Rome falls, the world shall fall." The Colosseum still stands, and unsurprisingly, Rome is also called the Eternal City, in reference to its eternal presence. Overlooking the Colosseum is the Palatine Hill. The word palace comes from Palatine, as in the Palatine Hill, because the houses here were huge and occupied by the wealthy. They were palatial. Next door is the ancient Roman Forum. Here is where the Senate met, and Mark Antony gave his famous eulogy of Julius Caesar here while standing over his murdered body. We don't know what he actually said, but Shakespeare wrote his own version in the play, Julius Caesar. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." Regardless of the words that were spoken in reality, we know it stirred the crowd's anger to fever pitch, leading to civil war. Such was the power of Antony's speech. The Forum was so glorious in its day, the Emperor Augustus, who rebuilt much of Rome, said, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble." Several triumphal arches can be seen here. This is the Arch of Constantine, right next to the Colosseum and near the entrance to the Forum. And this is the Arch of Titus. Triumphal arches were built to honor generals when they returned victorious from major military campaigns. The Arch of Titus was to commemorate General Titus's destruction of Jerusalem. You can see engravings here of treasures from the Jewish temple being looted, spoils of war for the Romans. All roads lead to Rome, or so the saying goes. Roads named 2,000 years ago, such as the Appian Way, can still be walked by visitors. They certainly knew how to build them in those days. Just a little over 2 kilometers away, or 1.6 miles, is the Pantheon, the only ancient Roman building still perfectly intact. But more on that later. Everywhere you wander, you'll see ruins from ancient times. Just a short walk from the Forum are the remains of Trajan's Market. With 150 shops, it was an early version of today's shopping malls, selling oils, fruits, and vegetables. Just around the corner, at the top of these stairs, you'll find the Piazza del Campidoglio, where the statue of Marcus Aurelius stands outside the Capitolini Museum. And if that name sounds familiar to you, Marcus Aurelius was also the character in the movie Gladiator, played by the late Richard Harris. Inside the museum, you'll see famous statues, such as the Dying Gaul, and Rome's legendary founders, Romulus and Remus. According to legend, they were suckled by a she-wolf who found them after they were abandoned. Eventually, they were discovered by a shepherd and his wife, who raised them. Later, they founded Rome. A viewpoint behind the museum looks back to the Forum. Walk just a few more minutes and you'll find it hard to miss this landmark, the Victor Emmanuel II Monument, designed in 1885 and inaugurated in 1911. In 1861, Victor Emmanuel unified all of the regions into one country, which we know today as Italy. He was Italy's first king and is regarded as the father of Italy. Local opinion has been divided regarding the design of this monument over the years. Some have said it's a bombastic and pretentious embarrassment, while others embraced its grand design. Critics mocked the structure, calling it the typewriter or wedding cake. Whichever way you look at it, it certainly is a bright landmark that is now a part of the Roman skyline. A popular must-do walk is best done in the late afternoon or early evening due to the light and slightly more agreeable temperature if you visit in the summer. You'll still see 2,000-year-old ancient ruins, but in contrast, you'll also see mostly historical landmarks from the 16 to 1700s. The time warp you can experience in Rome can be quite eclectic as you jump through the centuries viewing architecture from different periods. We start from the Spanish Steps. They're called the Spanish Steps because they look towards the Spanish Square where the Spanish embassy once was. This common meeting point draws crowds of visitors who take in the Roman atmosphere before beginning their evening stroll. As you walk the roads and lanes, it's easy to use Google or Apple Maps to wander to Rome's most famous water display, the Trevi Fountain. The fountain was built at the end of an aqueduct at the junction of 3 roads. These 3 streets, or Trevi, give the fountain its name, the 3 Streets Fountain, or Trevi Fountain. The statue of Oceanus, god of all fresh water on earth, makes an appropriate centerpiece. The fountain draws crowds of tourists who love engaging in a ritual requiring them to throw money away. According to tradition, if you toss a coin over your shoulder and into the fountain, one day you'll come back to Rome. If you toss 2 coins, you'll find eternal love in the eternal city. And 3 coins? Well, that ensures marriage. Hollywood made the Trevi famous in the 1954 movie 3 Coins in the Fountain, with the theme song of the same name sung by Frank Sinatra. And how much money do you suppose is cleaned up from the Trevi Fountain each year? Well, in recent years it was over 1.5 million euro. That's a lot of return visitors, eternal sweethearts and marriages. And with over 25 million tourists visiting Rome each year, it shouldn't be surprising. The money collected by the city goes to charity, so go on, throw your money in like a good tourist. It's all in a good cause. But remember we mentioned the Pantheon? Well, that's the next stop on our evening walk. Originally built from 25 AD, it was reconstructed by Hadrian between 118 and 125 AD. Its columns are each sculptured from a solid piece of stone. It was originally a temple before becoming a church and is still perfectly intact. As you step inside, you'll notice the wide open space with no supporting pillars. This was a marvel of engineering. The Romans, who discovered the self-supporting arch, by extension invented the self-supporting dome, which covers the Pantheon. This dome has an oculus called the Eye of God, filling the whole interior with light. This is the resting place of the father of Italy, Victor Emmanuel II. Just around the back of the Pantheon is this unexpected little surprise, an elephant supporting an obelisk. Worth having a look. Continuing our evening stroll, we arrive at the Piazza Navona, once the site of a chariot racetrack. It's now surrounded by classical buildings and cafes. More beautiful sculptural fountains are here. At the centre of the square is the Fountain of the Four Rivers, designed by Bernini in 1651. It represents the 4 most important rivers of the continents where Christianity was spread: the Nile, Danube, the Ganges, and the Rio de la Plata. When you get to the Tiber River, you'll see beautifully ornate bridges. The Ponte Vittorio Emanuele II, yes, the father of Italy, stands parallel to Ponte Sant'Angelo. Ponte Sant'Angelo is flanked by rows of angels on both the left and right, perfectly framing the view of Castle Sant'Angelo. Castle Sant'Angelo is a mausoleum of the Emperor Hadrian, who built it for himself and his family. Later, the popes used the building as a fortress. Today, it's a museum. Crossing the bridges brings you to the street leading to what Catholics believe is the holiest place on earth. At the center of Rome stands a tiny city within a city, one of the world's 7 microstates, the Vatican, headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church, home of the Pope, and with more nuns per square mile than anywhere on earth. Dominating your approach is the largest Christian church in the world, St. Peter's. As you approach the Renaissance behemoth, you walk through the massive St. Peter's Square with 2 curved colonnades shaped like arms wrapping around you and the other 300,000 people who can fit within it. There are 284 columns here. And above these stand 140 statues of saints sculptured by the followers of Bellini. Outside the cathedral stands a statue of St. Peter himself, holding the keys to the kingdom given to him by Christ. And you'll also notice the Swiss guards in ceremonial dress, their uniforms designed by Michelangelo. As you enter St. Peter's, look to your right. There you will see one of Michelangelo's most famous sculptures, the Pietà. When you gaze at how Michelangelo captured the look of sorrow on Mary's face as she cradles the body of her son, Jesus, and the ruffles on her clothes, you almost forget this is solid marble, made to look soft, emotional, and lifelike. Believers and non-believers alike gaze in awe as they look around, dwarfed by the 220-meter or 720-foot long softly lit interior. Peter's bones are believed to be kept here. Near the center stands this bronze canopy made up of 63 tons of bronze. Catholics consider this to be so holy, only the Pope can stand under it to give Mass. Above it all, the massive 42-meter or 138-foot diameter dome appears to float above visitors who are constantly looking up. You can climb to the top of the dome if you're fit enough to ascend 551 steps, or you can take an elevator part of the way, but even then, the remaining 320 steps have to be done on foot. These get narrower as you make your way up inside the cavity of the dome. But this breathtaking view is your reward for burning those calories. From here, you can see the Vatican's administration offices and the Pope's private gardens. They even have their own train station. Mark Twain once said, "From the dome of St. Peter's, one can see every notable object in Rome. He can see the panorama that is varied, extensive, beautiful to the eye, and more illustrious in history than any other in Europe." Designed by Michelangelo, the dome dominates the skyline, crowning the gargantuan edifice. You might say it was Michelangelo's crowning achievement. St. Peter's isn't the only star of the show when you visit Vatican City. The city is also home to one of the most important art collections in the world, the Vatican Museum. The museum is a maze of fine art collections, from sculptures to paintings and tapestries. But it is the buildings that are works of art unto themselves. Look down at the artistry of the floor tiles. And when you look up, you'll see frescoes that appear to be painted on textured ceilings. This is an optical illusion. This ceiling, for example, is a smooth curve. The shadows that appear to give it the three-dimensional appearance are actually painted on to give the illusion of texture. But there is one ceiling here that everyone comes to see, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. No other ceiling in the world is as recognized as this, painted by Michelangelo. In particular, the creation of man in which God reaches out to Adam, who almost touches the divine, but falls short. The entire ceiling depicts the stories of Genesis. The art of fresco painting is the technique of painting on one section of plaster at a time while it is still wet. The paint soaks into the plaster before it sets, resulting in a deep finish that does not fade or wear. No wonder it took Michelangelo over 4 years to paint this ceiling. He bickered with his patron, Pope Julius, constantly. This tension was well captured in the movie The Agony and the Ecstasy, where Pope Julius would ask him repeatedly, "When will you make an end?" To which Michelangelo repeatedly replied, "When I am finished." Try to find the time to see some of the smaller museums while you're in Rome. The Borghese Museum is set on park-like grounds and also houses important collections. This former villa is also richly decorated, with its interior design being part of the art collection. Famous sculptures include this one, the young David about to use his sling to slay Goliath, Boy with Thorn, The Rape of Proserpina, Pauline Borghese Bonaparte as Venus, and Apollo and Daphne. In the story, Apollo and Cupid argued over who was the most powerful. Cupid makes a point, literally, by shooting his golden arrow into Apollo, making him fall in love with Daphne, a nymph. At the same time, Cupid shoots a lead dart into Daphne, making her reject Apollo. The amorous god pursues her, and she cries out for help from Peneus, who turns her into a tree to escape Apollo. You can see the moment when Apollo is about to catch Daphne and the beginnings of her limbs turning into branches. Every work of art has a story rooted in myth or history, and a little knowledge of these stories helps us to appreciate the artist's love of bringing these to life through their dedication to perfecting their craft. But if you ever get to the point where you feel overwhelmed with too much culture, with endless classical art and architecture, remember you're looking at significant art history with your own eyes, hundreds of years old. Embrace it. And remember, it's best to buy your tickets online to all of these attractions well before you arrive in order to avoid the queues. A mere 1-hour train ride brings you to Villa d'Este, typically referred to as Tivoli Gardens. Once you disembark from the train, it's a fairly short walk up the hill and past this castle to get to the gates. Once again, just use your Google or Apple Maps and you'll find the villa with ease. And this is why it's worth the effort. The beautiful water gardens are world famous, and when you see it with your own eyes, you'll appreciate firsthand the reason for making the effort to get here. It's a peaceful contrast and an easy escape from the exciting but frantic bustle of Rome. The 16th century villa and gardens were commissioned by Cardinal d'Este through his mother, the infamous Lucretia Borgia. The gardens feature 51 fountains, 398 spouts, 364 water jets, and 64 waterfalls. But who's counting? Just stroll through and enjoy the peace of wonderful 16th century aquatic displays. With such little effort to get here, it's definitely worth the visit. But now it's time to catch our train to return to Rome for dinner. As the sun goes down, hot summer days in Rome become warm summer evenings. Earlier, we highlighted some of those lovely walks that are best taken in the late afternoon or early evening. You can stay in these areas or return later to dine. The lanes come to life as you stroll through the same areas you saw during the day, only now it's different with the lights. The souvenir stores, gelato stores, and stores for recreational pastimes. And culinary offerings of genuine Italian cuisine everywhere you look. There's an endless choice of cafes where you can sit, enjoying both the ancient and medieval surroundings, all floodlit to bring a little magic to the eternal city. Piazza Navona turns into a fairyland with its fountains taking on a whole new appearance. The Trevi fountain still draws the crowds during the warm summer evenings. And dining while overlooking the Pantheon helps you to just slow down and appreciate the ancient monuments that surround you now that the rush of sightseeing and the hot summer heat is over for the day. Savor the wonderful things you've seen, from the ancient to the medieval to the art history, and of course the food, all here in the eternal city of Rome, a treasure of the world.